Okay, so the advocate of the affirmative side has said, for the significance issue, that the idea of lex talionis, the idea of eye for an eye, for these juveniles who commit murder, they should be sentenced to prison for life because it meets the punishment meets the crime. But the question is whether or not these juveniles who commit murder, is their murder actually the level of standard that we should put them as same as the adults? According to University of Columbia, they stated that the existence of a juvenile justice system separate from the adult criminal justice system is predicated on two fundamental assumptions about adolescents. That one, that they are less capable of mature judgment than adults and are therefore less culpable for any offenses that they commit, and two, that they are more amenable to treatment than adults and therefore are more likely to profit from rehab. So the idea that for an eye, they should be sentenced to life without parole. But over the past decade, it's clear that our society and the government has realized that these juveniles who commit these heinous crimes, they should be evaluated on a different level than adults because of their less developed mind and their more tendencies to commit these crimes without knowing the outcomes or the punishments that they would receive. According to ActForYouth.net, there's new findings show that the greatest changes to the parts of the brain that are responsible for functions such as self-control, judgment, emotions, and organization occur between puberty and adulthood. So it's clear that these juveniles who usually around the age of 14 to 18 who are involved in these capital crimes, mainly homicide, they're coerced, and they have other they're kind of persuaded by other outside sources that show that they are not really processing what the punishment is of doing these crimes. And so it's clear that the U.S. has taken steps towards changing this. According to Mental Health America, the United States is one of the few countries in the world that allow for sentencing juvenile offenders to life without parole. One of two countries that currently have people incarcerated for crimes committed as juveniles, and the only country currently known to still sentence juveniles to life without parole. So it's clear that many other countries have realized that sentencing these juveniles to life without parole is not the correct punishment that they deserve for these crimes that they did at such a young age. According to Amnesty International, several countries have the practice on their books. However, the group knows of no cases outside the U.S. in which such a sentence, life sentence, has been imposed in recent years. And so, over the past decade, the U.S. government has taken steps towards these sentencing of these juveniles. In the Supreme Court case Roper v. Simmons in 2005, the Supreme Court ruled that juveniles can't be sentenced to death. Just half a decade later, in Graham versus Florida, court precedent recognizes that non-homicide offenses do not warrant the most serious punishment available, and so they outlawed the idea of sentencing juveniles to life without parole for non-homicide cases. So, and then just 2 years later, in two different cases, Miller v. Alabama and Jackson v. Hobbs, the court ruled that the life sentences of these homicide offenders cannot be a mandatory sentence. They, as the advocate has already stated, they're looked at a case-by-case basis, and so it's already clear that the Supreme Court has already seen that these cases of juveniles, they don't pertain to the standards of the adults. Just because they are involved in a homicide offense, it matters, but it doesn't warrant a mandatory life sentence, and so it was outruled. And so California, after this ruling in 2012, they took it into their own hands for their own sentences. In 2012, the Senate Bill 9 was passed, which allowed for the previous juveniles who were sentenced to life another chance at a rehearing. And so this process of rehearing, it takes many steps in which the juvenile has includes steps such as how requirements that the juvenile has this only one offense of this homicide offense, and they showed signs of rehabilitation during their sentencing. And so even with this, in 2012, the Youth Law Organization reported that about 2,500 people in the U.S. are serving life in prison, and just in California, 309 of them are, there's 309. And so over the past decade, California has realized that these sentences are, it's shown that these rehearings are effective, and just 5 years later, just last month, they passed another Senate bill where it outlawed the idea of life without parole. And so now, when the advocate said that there's currently juveniles sentenced to life without parole, that's incorrect because it was outlawed just last month. And so all of the case-by-case basis of the juveniles that are currently in sentence, they're now going to be reheared at a minimum of 15 years after their incarceration. And so when the advocate says that the idea of releasing these prisoners back into society that will constantly haunt the families of the victims, it's hard to measure that because, well, I mean, it was done at the juvenile age, so with 15 years of rehabilitation, they will be released around the age of 28 and plus. And so it's clear that after the age of maturity, they've realized their mistakes and they have much room for rehab and to know the mistakes that they made as a juvenile, so they shouldn't be punished just because of one crime they committed at such a young and vulnerable age. And so for the solvency claim that the advocate says that there are safer cities,